we're very excited to have Ken Hamlin with us. So Ken is retired from Fish and Wildlife Management, where he had a long and successful career, which included research and writing on various topics in that field. But he spent a lot of his retirement focusing on his pursuits as an amateur historian, and has collected a lot of letters and focused on postal history in his two books, Montana Through the Mail, 1810 to 1889, and Butte Postcard History Series. And he's also written numerous articles for the Gallatin Historical Society Quarterly. So today he'll be speaking on some of the topics from his book, Montana Through the Mail, and he'll be focusing on letters from the Montana frontier, especially dealing with themes of courtship, husband and wife communication, leading us up to our theme of Valentine's Day. So with that, welcome to Ken.
Can you hear me okay? Whoops. Is that any better? Just hold it. Okay. I'm going to cover a little general information on mail and postal service before I get to the main presentation. My collecting of correspondence, photographs, documents was inspired by the Montana Historical Society book, A Manuscript History of Montana, which some of you may know of, written in 1976. In the book itself, there's 278 letters I use. Additionally, I have letters in my collection that aren't in the book that I use for documentation of the subject matter people were most interested in, and transit times of the mail, when it was sent and when it was received. For this talk, keyed to the Montana Historical Society workshop, I'm only using portions of 32 letters. There were really four methods of mail travel plus hand delivery through the territorial period and pre-territorial, actually. The one that most people think of, stagecoaches, were very important. This letter on the far right, upper right, was written by the territorial governor's wife, Mary Edgerton, to her mother in Talmadge, Ohio, and it was postmarked Bannock City in 1865. That's in my collection, actually, the envelope, but the Historical Society has a letter in their collection, and James Thane wrote a book on it. After 1880 to 83, when two railroads came to Montana, then railroads were important in transporting mail very fast. That's a Billings and Helena RPO cancel, was called. Letters were dropped off, for instance, this one in Bozeman at the depot, and they were canceled on the railroad mail car. Some people think about letters on steamboats, but there never was an official mail route, government mail route on steamboats on the Missouri, because it was a very short transportation period and undependable. But there were letters hand carried by the captains and passengers that did travel by steamboat. The top letter is what I thought when I purchased it might be the only surviving envelope from Montana's long distance Pony Express. As it turned out, when I researched the date and it was received, it turns out it was 1870, which was after the Pony Express route failed. Just a few quick examples of cancels before I get to the main talk. The top one is Stoneville, Montana, with the only known skull and crossbones killer cancel. A year later, Stoneville became Alzada, which I think most of you know where Alzada is. This is an example of a manuscript cancel from Beartown, Montana, 1871, in my collection. As far as I know, this is the earliest transatlantic letter sent from Montana. So far, one earlier hasn't been found. This is an example of a sub-collection area illustrated advertising from Kibbe, Montana. Kibbe is toward the belts from Rainsford up kind of by the sluice boxes area, if you know where that was. Amesville, Montana. That was toward the Idaho border from Clark Canyon Reservoir. Tower, Montana only existed for about 5 months, about 2 miles from Phillipsburg. It was a mining town. That's the only known postmark from that town. Okay, a lot of people may not know this, but Lewis and Clark didn't write any letters from within Montana. They mailed letters from the Dakotas on their first camping thing, and then from the coast at Portland, but not from Montana. So the first 3 letters ever written in what became Montana, we drove within a mile of on the way up here by Three Forks, Montana, at what was Fort Henry in 1810. Pierre Menard was writing letters. There were 3 letters written. One of them, currently the Montana Historical Society has the original letter that he wrote to Pierre Choteau, his boss and brother-in-law, head of the fur company. Another letter was written by Reuben Lewis, who, unknown to him at the time, his brother Meriwether had died 6 months before. He wrote a letter to Meriwether. The letter I'm featuring here, he's writing to his wife Angelique. He calls her Doll in this letter. The Illinois Historical Society has this letter. It's not in my collection. Dear Doll, I'm taking advantage of the fact that John Coulter leaves for St. Louis tomorrow to inform you that I'm always in perfect health, although at the moment I am the image of a skeleton, since I do not have an ounce of fat, but I have never felt better. The country is rich in beaver, but the incursion of the Blackfeet discourages so much our hunters. 2 days after they had begun their hunt about 10 leagues from here, a league is generally considered about 3 miles, so it could have been in a radius as far as Bozeman where this occurred. The Blackfoot attacked and plundered them. In this defeat, we have found only 2 of the whites who were killed. 3 others are missing, and from their possessions, we believe them either dead or prisoners. It would be much better if they were dead rather than prisoners. I have always before my eyes the barbarity of the Blackfeet. They mutilated with their knives the 2 they killed. Kiss our dear child for me, and tell him to expect me in July, and believe me for life, your affectionate Pierre Menard. So that's another thing. John Coulter might be the first postal person in Montana. But how would you like to receive this letter from your husband and its description? I've left out some of the description. It's pretty rough, so she's going to get this letter in about May, because traveling downriver by canoe was fairly fast. But she won't know till sometime in July if her husband even survived. So this was one of the early separations of family and how it occurred, and it was probably frustrating to both husband and wife. This letter was written by a guy named Thomas Adams to James Stewart, who I think most of you will know who he is, the brother of Granville. The postmark Washington, D.C., but the route, it came out to Salt Lake City and then traveled on A.J. Oliver's Panic and Salt Lake Express to Virginia City, Idaho Territory. In 1863, Virginia City was still in Idaho Territory. I'm not going to go into a lot of the letter, but it's pretty interesting, couple-page letter, and it mentions almost every name of the 1850s pioneers in Montana, a lot of whom later settled in the Bitterroot and Deer Lodge area. It also talks about Indian wives, Native American wives of these pioneers. A lot of these marriages were called marriages. They lasted for a few days, but some of them lasted for a lifetime. Adams is one of the few days type guys. On one of his trips to Montana with the Stewarts, he went out and kidnapped his son by a previous marriage. But the boy was so distraught and cried so much, the Stewart brothers convinced him to turn the little boy back over to his mother. And another example of early family separation. Kind of related to that, it's in the book in another place. I talk about it. I don't know how many of you know of it. In 1907 and 1909, the Democrat senator from Winston, who was the son of a Virginia City pioneer, introduced the anti-miscegenation bill, prohibiting marriages between Negroes, Chinese, Japanese, and whites, and giving penalties for performing those marriages. It failed in 1907. It passed in 1909 and was on the books in Montana until February 2nd, 1953. Note that the law did not prohibit marriages between Native Americans and whites. Why do you think that occurred? When Idaho Territory law was brought to Montana to serve as a template for the Montana territorial laws, it had prohibits on interracial marriages, but the Montana territorial legislature, despite attempts every year, never passed a law banning interracial marriages. Again, why do you think that occurred? I'm sure you know it's because a lot of the early pioneers I mentioned had Indian wives. A lot of the legislators in those times had Indian wives. And like I say, some of these people, it lasted a lifetime. Okay, this letter is from my wife's favorite letter writer. It's a letter from 8-year-old Homer Thomas to his grandmother in Illinois, written on December 17th, 1864. This letter is not in my collection. It's in the Montana Historical Society Book of Manuscript History of Montana. Homer's father, George, was very famous around the Gallatin Valley and across the state as a flour mill operator and producer of high-quality flour. So Homer says, "Dear Grandma, I thought I'd like to hear from us also. I thought I'd write you a few lines to let you know I've not forgotten you all yet. I've gotten away from here in the Indian and gold country where there's plenty of gold, but it's hard to get a hold of it." Incidentally, when I have these 3 little dots, that means I'm leaving out a lot of parts of the letter. Well, Grandma, it's pretty near Christmas time, and I do not expect to get many things this year, for it is not like home, because old Santa Claus do not come out here to give children things, because he thinks all the children are too smart to come out to this old place. I tell you, Georgie has grown mighty fast and getting pretty big now. He can say almost everything. He says, "I want to go to Grandma's and get some cake." He don't know anything about apples, or I bet he'd want some of them too. Father has got lots of gold dust, and that is the kind of money we have out here, none of your greenbacks. I haven't got any gold yet, but when I sell my calf, I will get it all in gold. I will write every chance I get, and I want you to do the same. Well, elsewhere in the letter, Homer mentions he's not real happy with the primitive conditions in Montana, and he wants to go back to Illinois and to his grandma's and eat apples and cake too. But his family stayed in Montana throughout their lives, and as far as I know, Homer never got to see his grandma again. Another example of the family separation that occurred with the pioneers. And I'm going to cover using only 3 letters and just a little bit of information. The wing letters, I call them. I have about 150 letters from the wing correspondence in my collection that range from the 1850s when he was in Colorado seeking gold into the 1920s. I am only using 3 of these letters here. George Wing was the son of a whaling captain in Massachusetts, and Mary Gould was the daughter of a prominent merchant in Iowa. They were both raised as Quakers. At the time they started writing, George was 26 and Mary was 17 years old. And George was one of the about 400 people that overwintered in Bannack in the winter of 1862-63, right after White discovered gold at Bannack. And they were waiting for, everybody was waiting for spring conditions and water to start panning away. At the time of this 1863 letter, George is 30 and Mary is 21. It's a 16-page letter, and I'm only using that much of it right there. This is called a tombstone postmark, Bannack City Express. After he wrote it in Virginia City, carried it back to their claims in Bannack, then went on this express to Salt Lake City, which you can barely read, and then across the plains. I have panned out as high as $45. One day last winter, we took out over $600. Now, in today's purchasing power, that $45 is about $5,000, and the $600 is about $67,000. That's how much it would purchase today, that much gold. This is the best season to see the country, and I wish you were out here now, and I had nothing else to do but trot you over it. A party just in say they found some falls on the Yellowstone, which they judged were over 200 feet high. We will go see them. I think the ladies like living here as a general rule, but most of them are so confined to hard work that they find little time for pleasure. I think of you always and wish you happy, George. Well, George and his brother actually were some of the few who made a lot of money in Bannack and Virginia City in the early placer days. But they took all their placer money and then bought up silver claims throughout southwestern Montana to try to make even more money. This letter here is written in 1875 after the Panic of 1873 that totally destroyed the value of silver, for example, and created a lot of other problems. My dearest Mary, this is Argenta, the deserted village. It is one of the finest residential localities in the territory, situated on a high gravelly bench, broad and level. But on the hills, the stream in full view is a graveyard of our 30,000. The grave still open as if waiting for more, while along the banks of the stream are over 100,000 worth of ruins of furnaces. For a year or two after I left, which was in 1866, it was the most promising camp in the territory. Then the rest of the letter gives a bunch of descriptions about life and living conditions while he's proving up on the claims. He came back to help his brother prove up on their claims. They're still trying to sell them and get money out of their silver claims. I think and dream of you always. With love to all, George. Now the 30,000 that he and his brother lost is about 550,000 in purchasing value today. So he lost a lot of money. He came back to Montana one more time in 1881 to 1883, again to try to see if he couldn't dig a little further and find some richer veins of silver. And while he was out there, he received letters that tells his mother has died. My dear Mary, your letter of a week ago came yesterday noon, and with it two from New Bedford from Bessie and Rebecca, that's his sisters, by which I knew what must be told. The news is not at all unexpected, but you know we are never ready for such. With numerous other dreams, I had long ago given up the hope, though not the desire of seeing her and doing for her and hers the things we have so often wished. I am glad Mother had letters from all of us and from Robert so near the last days. I have realized for some time that this and other things might come to me as they do to others. We are no privileged persons, but dwell within the circle of laws as all do. I long to see you and be of some better help to you, but there is no way for it now. So I can only kiss you goodbye and wish for you the help that is needed, George. George remained poor after he blew all of his money throughout the rest of his life. But through the help of his father-in-law and mother-in-law, George and Mary raised 4 children who were very educated and became very successful later in their lives. Mary died in 1895 at age 54, and George then moved back to Massachusetts and died in 1918 at age 84. In the book, there's, like I say, about 70 letters of this correspondence, so there's much more about American Victorian life and courtship and marriage covered there. These are examples of some 1866 letters from the Gallatin Valley, Helena, and Virginia City. Only thing here, in this one, the post office ran out of stamps, so they just put a paid 3 on there. Here's a couple of the letters, some excerpts written from the Gallatin Valley, 1866, and it's actually postmarked Virginia City because that was the closest postmark. In 1866, Bozeman didn't get a post office till much later. Dear wife, and then there's much discussion of all the work she's doing back home in Illinois, they had a prosperous farm in Illinois. So she's taking care of all the work, the taxes, hired men, all that stuff back home while he's out here. Instead of gold, he's running a farm in Bozeman, which is the way to make money rather than look for gold, really. There was a result of a little Indian excitement that got up here a short time since. There were some half-breeds from Bozeman town out trading with the Crow Indians. They saw a band of Sioux, left the wagon load and team, and came here thinking the Sioux were following. The excitement has mostly died away. If the Indians and grasshoppers will let us alone, and there comes a good big immigration to buy what we raise at good fair prices, that is what the people of this valley want. My respect to all the children, tell them to study and learn much. Write often, as I am always glad to hear from you and the children. Yours truly, J.S. Simpson. James Simpson was 59 when he wrote this letter, and his wife, Berdella, was 38. She was taking care of their farm and 5 children at that time. James went back to Illinois shortly after writing this letter and fathered 1 more child, and then died in 1869. Berdella managed the substantial farm and 6 children after that back in Illinois. And she did it until 1880 when the oldest son took over. So you'll be able to see in a lot of letters that are in the book, the wives did a lot of the work, in some cases most of the work, while the husbands are out trying to get really rich. Here's a letter written about the same time period from Helena to Vermont. David Griswold is 40 years old. His wife Mary is 28 when he's writing this letter. My dear little wife, I've received 2 letters from you this week, one dated the 23rd and 29th of April. It gives me much pleasure to read letters from you. I wish I could get them a little quicker. I am glad to know you all keep so well. You have been telling me about baby. I feel I am losing a great deal of pleasure by not being where I can appreciate her cunning tricks. I wish you could keep her where she is until I come home. Tell the little boys I am glad they are such good little boys and mind their mama. Farming is a good business here, but a man does not want to take one for a short time. If you was only here and consent to stay 3 or 4 years, I would go into it first thing. I cannot live away from you and the children. I often ask myself why I ever left you behind. You need not worry about my leaving you behind again. My dear wife, we must stay together when we meet again, and I hope it will be before too many months. It is milking time, and I must bid my darling a good night with much love and kisses for yourself and the little ones from your true husband, David. Now, David was back in Vermont by the 1870 census. He had one more daughter born in 1873. And in the 1870 census, he's listed as a wheelwright, a carriage maker in the 1880 census, and a butter tub manufacturer in the 1890 census. He didn't make a lot of money, obviously, in Montana, but he went back home to his family, which was his most important thing, he found out. Mary died in 1894 and David in 1910. One brief little thing here, just getting away from the letters. You notice I mentioned didn't mention what he was doing in 1890. Most of you should know, I hope, that the census records for 1890 almost totally burned up. So we don't have online research access to those records. Some general information we can get from printed publications like state population and so on, but the detailed census information we cannot access. This letter was written by William Claggett to his wife. He was a mining attorney in Deer Lodge. My dearest wife, I have 3 letters from you since I wrote last, dated August 16th, 23rd, and 30th. I need not assure you that their presence gave me much pleasure. Also to hear of your starting from Indianapolis and then your safe arrival. I thought it would be advisable for you to spend a portion of your time in Indiana or New Orleans, as it would be a great diversion for you, and I can very well imagine that Keokuk, Iowa, would not be the most delightful place in the world to you, with the care of the children and the dramatically opposed ideas of the 2 houses on the subject of their government. She's staying with his parents, and his parents have a different idea about how the kids could be raised than he and his wife do. So the wife is having to put up with those battles back home while he's out here in Montana. As soon as I go over to Helen, I will send you some spending money. A draft cannot be obtained here. I do not know whether I'll be down to the States this winter or not, but the chances are I will not. Have Mamie and Idaho got my last letter to them? Kiss them for Papa and tell them I am glad to hear from Mama that they are good girls. Give my love to your relatives. Take 1,000 kisses for yourself, dear little woman. From your loving husband, William Claggett. I have a number of other letters in this correspondence, but this is all I have time to cover here. A little bit later, Claggett brought his family back to Montana, and so they got away from his parents. He served as a territorial delegate to Congress, and in that capacity, he's the one that introduced the bill to establish Yellowstone National Park and the U.S. Assay Office in Helena. He lost the next election. Later, he moved to the Idaho mining districts to practice law there. He was a president of the Idaho Constitutional Convention. And he ended up dying in Spokane, Washington at age 63, leaving a wife and 6 children. Here's one of my favorites too. At the time this letter was written, Edward Stackpole was a merchant and postmaster at Deer Lodge. He originally came to Montana with the 1866 Fisk expedition across the plains on the northern plains to Fort Benton, and then down to Virginia City and so on. My dear Ed, have you forgotten your old mother? His mother's writing from Cleveland, Ohio. I have written letter after letter and got no answer. I can't imagine why it is so. I have decided that I would write no more, but necessity compels me. I shall ere this reaches thee, another Quaker, owing $20 for my board, not $1 to pay it with. I do feel exceedingly to have to call upon thee. I am weary of watching for the postman. If you think of me at all, you can picture me as being lonely. I do not mind so much when I get letters from loved ones, but when week after week passes as of late without a word, it makes me heartsick. If you have any pity for me, please write. I feared the Indians had been tampering with your stages. I would wait to mail until the mail came and perhaps I'd get a letter. But disappointment seems my lot. I do not think I shall write again until thee do. It is too much of a one-sided business, and I use my last stamp upon this. In much love, I am as ever thy loving mother. Well, Ed's wife, Molly, was actually the main correspondent with his mother. I have a bunch of other letters in this correspondence too. Ed's mother did find another boarding house thanks to a son that lived back in the same state she did. And despite her threats, she continued sending letters to Ed. Ed's mother died at age 94, surviving another 22 years after writing this letter. Ed died in Ketchikan, Alaska in 1923, and his wife Molly in 1930. I was unable to document whether Ed ever went back to Cleveland to visit his mother again. I have another series of letters written from a rancher's wife. They were living in a town that became Chestnut, Montana, which was just across the river from what is now Cascade, Montana. At the time these first letters were written, they were carried across the river and postmarked at Fort Shaw and Sun River, which was about 15 miles north, straight line north. My dear mother, I know you have been looking for a letter from me in fear, have worried from not getting one. I did not write when it was my time to do so. The reason was John and I went over the river, he to do business, I to visit. Now the river is so that I don't know when this can go. You must not worry when they do not come now, for there may be many times when we cannot send them, especially in the spring. I have got 2 new print dresses and will send a piece in this. The piece of fabric wasn't a letter I had. Mine wear out so fast here, I think it's the water, you have to break it. God take care of you, my mother. My dear mother, do you know my time is going so fast and the allotted years will soon pass when I am to be home again. Goodbye, mother. Write when you can and be happy. Now they're in Chestnut, and Mary's husband, John, is a postmaster at Chestnut, actually. Your letter came last week. Was glad you were well enough to write. He's getting Mr. Harris, her husband, ready for the roundup. I think it will take them 2 months. We'll be gone 3 weeks before coming home at all. So even when they were here, both of them living in the same house, there was quite a few of them that had times of separation of the family just because of work. How I wish you could be with us while John is away. Love to all who inquire for me. I have been hard at work expecting company for dinner, but no one has come yet, so we'll wait and write. Have made bread, washed my floors, and have beans, turnips, beets, and new potatoes on boiling for dinner, and shall have steak antelope for dinner. John has been home from roundup 2 weeks. Then next year we'll soon be here, and then if the cattle don't die, I hope to come home. There's a cattle disease spreading across the range in that area, taking mostly young yearling cattle. The minister stayed with us last Saturday and Sunday, and Sunday I did not forget to have him ask the blessing this time. Yesterday I papered with pictures the privy and carpeted it, and it looks nice and inviting. So I gather from the laughs you all know what a privy is. Okay, this is the last letter in that correspondence. Mary was 51 to 53 years old during this correspondence. Her mother was 85 to 87 years old. My dear mother, I intended to have written you last week, but was too busy on mail day and too tired at night to write. I've been busy haying and then go to the mountains for logs and poles for the hen house and corrals. We have a new minister was here for tea Friday night and for dinner Sunday with another divine and 4 common people. I had to work lively to get dinner for 8 and get back to church on time. This is a Methodist and seems jovial and social and jovial. Do you ever think that next year I shall be with you, or had you rather I would wait another year? Write and tell me in your next. That is the time I set when leaving you, and if too many cattle don't die, I hope to make my promise good. I shall hope to hear from your next mail from your own Mary. Mary's mother died 2 years after this letter, and I don't have any other letters, so I do not know whether Mary ever got to visit her mother before she died. John Harris was a prominent cattle rancher in the area of Chestnut, Montana, near Cascade. He served in the 1895 legislature and died in 1900. Mary died Christmas Day, 1901. They had no children. Okay, this letter was written by banker Alden Bennett from Virginia City in 1880. His wife and child are down in Utah visiting her relatives and have been for some time. Bennett was an engineer for the Union Pacific Railroad. He came to Virginia City in 1870, taught school, was county superintendent, then worked for banks as a bookkeeper, became a partner, and eventually owned a bank in Virginia City. He was a mayor and involved in almost all of Virginia City's political and social activities. My darling wife, perhaps this will be the last letter which I write to you while you're away, and this thought leads me to say I have enjoyed writing this series of letters very much. It has almost seemed like visiting with you and baby, but writing to you or hearing from you is not like having you with me all the time. What a change 2 years have brought. Why, I hardly have a thought now, but what in some way is connected with you and our babies. Certainly my great desire to do well in business, to save money, is that you and ours may always have a comfortable home with enough to eat and wear and to spend. I hope, my dearest wife, that this long visit of yours has brought to you as it has to me, a realizing sense of the important fact to us. Our happiest days are when we are together, and that the dearest place to us is our home. Has baby learned to walk yet? I shan't send my kisses to you and baby at this time, but we'll keep them for you until I see you. Yours lovingly, Alden. Alden, a little bit later, is going down to Red Rock, Montana, which is by Clark Canyon Reservoir. And the Utah Northern Railroad has just reached Red Rock, Montana. So this is one of the first big benefits of the railroads coming into Montana. Alden is able to go down there and get his wife and babies and bring them home. This is the first series of letters I ever purchased. I bought them from an auction house in Massachusetts. Salisbury was a stage stop just on the Sheridan side of Twin Bridges. His daughter, he's writing to his daughter in Massachusetts. Dear Helen, I was taken sick and unconscious for most of 2 weeks and expected to die. I would like to send you money, but my sickness has cost me $1,300. I feel sorry for your hard times. I now send you $5. Sorry, I cannot send more. I would like to see you very much, but you know I am growing old and cannot stay here long. It is 9 years since I last saw you. July 6th, more talk about poor health, bad luck with crops, grasshoppers, hail, and so on. I send you another $10. If I could send you more, I would. Money comes very hard to me. October 14th. Another severe fit of sickness. I'm sorry to send you this letter without sending you money. November 23rd. Your father is very sick and has been for a long time. I don't think he will live long. Write to Hattie, which is the stepmother. She has just gave me $10 for me to send you. He is in debt very bad. This letter was dictated to a stepbrother by John Closton, by her father. And based on the tombstone, the next day he died. Okay, after the father has died, the stepmother writes and promises support to his daughter while settling $3,000 to $4,000 in debt. 1882, she's still settling debts. She sends another $10. February 5th, the last letter I have, she's settling debt, but she says, I borrowed $150 to erect an iron fence around Father's grave, the only one in this part of the territory. We'll buy a gravestone next year, sends $10. Well, this is one of the first expeditions my poor wife had to take with me to do research in the field in history. We went down to the area and started looking at cemeteries. And there's two of them right close to where Salisbury is, the Twin Bridges and the Masonic Cemetery, but we didn't find anything there. We finally found the gravestone at the Sheridan Cemetery. You notice there's no iron fence around it, but I talked to Ted Darby, the local historian and cemetery board member, and he said if there ever had been one, they would have removed it for easier maintenance, mowing, and so on. So given that the tombstone is there, I call this series of letters a promise kept. Okay, now to the next subject matter, courting through the mail. The postcards are all 1910s. The second from the right would be a Victorian era Valentine. I have more letters in this series than the three I'm going to present as well. At the time this letter was written, William is 31 years old and Maggie is 18. He's in Leesburg, Idaho, and he's sending it to Maggie in Helena, Montana. Notice up here there's a paid written in pencil. That means the letter was hand carried from Leesburg, Idaho over to, this doesn't show very well, Bannock City, Montana, where it started in the mail system. Now that paid $1 means That's in gold at that time. And that gold today would be worth about $110. So it cost William $110.03 to send this letter to the galleys courting. Dear Maggie, I've been very busy and I'm almost day and night since I've been here trying to find something I could try to make some money out of. And I have probably not written to you as often as I should have done. I've been to the office every time the mail came in, looking with great anxiety for a letter from your kind hands, and haven't got it yet. I don't think for a minute that you have forgotten me for so soon. William Rowe. And then he has one of his numerous postscripts. When we are far away from lips that we love, we will make love and think of powers above. On my mind, great care, I've lost sight of memory, dear. Here's another letter a little later. He's back in Montana at Gold Creek. This envelope's manuscript canceled. Deer Lodge, the Holiday Overland Mail and Express Company was bought out by Wells Fargo about 5 months before this was mailed, but the envelope is still good for postage. Miss Maggie Deskin, dearest and loved friend, I have just started to pass away the day which will be very lonely to me as it is Sunday and I'm not at work and have nothing to employ my mind but to think of you, one who may think that I'll sometime forget her, but not while on this earth, and when we on our graves and our soul has crossed the river. I hope to think of heart and hand I long before give her. I wish I had thought to ask you if you had your likeness taken, so as I might have something to love when I'm far away from you and alone, as I never expect to see anything else I love but you or your likeness. I would sooner have a letter from her, than to have a chicken fry when I have went all day without my dinner. Now, when writing your Valentines, there's a line you might keep in mind. Okay, he's working on the Rock Creek Ditch, which is a Conrad Corps project to bring water in for mining. Dear Maggie, allow me to address you a few lines which I hope will meet you with a favorable reception in your kind letter, bearing the date of the 18th instant, came safe to hand a day or two ago, and was read with much attention and feeling. If you're reading along, you can see how his spelling is. I guess you notice that, and grammar. I have never met anyone that I love better than you. If I get you, I am satisfied with my choice. And if you are not, now is the time to let it be known. As we have made up our mind to marry, it matters not who we have loved, nor who we have seen, nor how pretty or smart they was. It will be you and I running our little dwelling. I have always thought if I ever married, all my studies would be to my wife's happiness. And I think it will be the same with you. I now write by the midnight candle. I must close, your true friend, William Rowe. Then he has another one of his postscripts at the end. Oh, might I kiss those eyes of fire, a million would scarcely quench desire. Then I would steep my lips' bliss and dwell one age on every kiss. Even though the numbers did exceed the yellow harvest countless seed. Not should my kiss from thine dissever, still would we cling and kiss forever. William, he's plagiarizing George Gordon, Lord Byron there. As you see with all of his spelling and grammar, he was one of numerous people. He obviously had access to books and reading and could read and plagiarize. There was other pioneers like that. The Stewart brothers were examples. George Wing was another example. Some of these people were really well read and searched out books. Did William's love letters and plagiarizing work? Did Maggie fall for it? About a month later, they were married. Just by random chance on eBay, I ran across a photo of the results of their marriage. This is the first daughter and fifth child, Rilla Effie Rowe, a result of their marriage. William and Maggie settled at Jefferson City and had 9 children, 2 dying early. William died in 1916 at 79 years old, and Maggie died in 1923 at 73 years old. Okay, this one's from Glendive, Montana, written to Illinois. Dear Isadora, I must hasten to answer that good long letter of yours which I received Sunday evening. I would like to have just such a letter every Saturday evening from you, or as you say, a little sooner, oftener. But my dear, don't use swear words. I believe you're getting worse since I left Illinois. One would naturally think you had been associating with Miss Cleland or Miss Lee Beck or Grundy Wilson or some such. You know that I have always done all I could to break you of it. But now all has changed and I'm waiting for you to name the day. I can leave here about the 1st of March, but not sooner. I would like to return here by the 10th of May. Are you willing to return with me? I know that it will be a great change for you, but if you are not contented after 1 year, we will return to Illinois. With you here, I would be supremely happy. Oh, that I see you tonight and tell you this and many other things that it would take too long to write. Write soon, to your own Frank. They were married in Illinois the next spring, 1884, and returned to Montana. The winter of 1886-87 almost wiped out their horse and cattle herd, but they persevered and built the herd back up again. He became a fairly prominent rancher in the Glendive area. But Isadora's health failed and they moved to California in 1909, where she died in 1913 and he died in 1933. They had no children. Here's 2 letters written from Livingston, Montana to Pennsylvania in 1884. Friend Minnie, I have last concluded to write you no matter what the consequences may be. When 3 weeks more rolls by, it will been 2 years since I have seen you. Some of my once best friends never think of writing, either for the satisfaction of hearing from an old friend or at least to learn of our interesting country of the Yellowstone Valley, river and lake and the great national park, which is 50 miles from where I live. I went last summer all through the park and saw many things which I would be pleased to describe at some future time, providing this is favorable. Now, Minnie, please excuse me for not writing long ere this, for I often thought of you, but did not know whether it would be favorable in all respects, although at last determined to find out. The coming fall or next fall, I'm coming home to see Mother and Uncle Gus, Aunt Minnie, and Eddie, and all my relatives and acquaintances. As I am lonely living alone, I have another object in view which need not be explained. If you deem this worthy of an answer, please write. Truly your friend, Harry E. Brady. Well, she did write, and there was a second letter I have that he wrote back to her. Once again, like William Rowe, in the letter he wrote back at the end, he plagiarized a poet. In this case, Hartley Coleridge, who is the son of the more famous poet Samuel Taylor Coleridge. When I see these things, they strike something in my mind, and I know that the letter writer didn't write them. So nowadays it's easy to look things up on the internet and find out what the real story was. Anyway, they didn't end up marrying, but the 1910 census shows that Harry is back in Clinton, Pennsylvania, married to an MMA with a 17-year-old son. I think this is my last one. Written, says had Dateline Great Falls to Round Grove, Missouri, but the cancel is actually Sand Coulee, Montana. That's the only territorial cancel known from Sand Coulee, Montana. Miss Laura, dear friend, it affords me much pleasure this evening to know that I have the liberty of responding to your kind message, the contents of which was gladly comprehended. And as for that young man that looks like me, guess you will poison his wife. You stated that you would like to see me, yes, and I would be much pleased to see you and squeeze those sweet bones and kiss that sweet meat of yours. Well, Laura, I wish you could be at Great Falls and see whether or not you would like to live out in this western country. As for myself, I am getting along fine and never go anywhere, only to church and temperance lodge. Oh, how I wish you were here tonight to go to church and hear a western preacher make his tongue rattle. Hoping to hear from you soon, I remain yours, W.R. Glasscock. Well, this marriage didn't work out either. He married another girl 2 years later named Anna. They had a son and daughter. He served in the 1895 legislature, moved to Obando, and later on to the Missoula area where he died in 1943. Laura, the recipient of the letter, had a child out of wedlock and lived with her parents and brother after that. She died in 1942. Now, the next letter isn't territorial, but I'm throwing it in as a way to try to encourage you all to save all correspondence you can, including that right through today, because some historian or weird person like me will be interested in it later. The guy's right, he's working at Bozeman Hot Springs writing to Miss Ruth in Three Forks, Montana. My dear honey bunch of catnip. I have caught some kind of a dose and don't know just what it is, so we'll give you some of the symptoms and you can see what you think it is. My toes turns in and my heel stands out. My head aches and I have the gout. My hair stands up like an angry old hog. When people goes by, I just growl like a dog. My eyebrows stick up, my mustache sticks in. My toenails turn black and so has my skin. My heart beats so vicious it knocked everything loose. My brain has gone withered and I'm silly as a goose. My knees has commenced knocking, the bone almost bare. I have a pain someplace, but I cannot tell where. My chest stands right out, I have muscle to spare. But I'm a gone gosling if I don't have good care. One ear goes up like a skyrocket in June, the other hangs down like a big mushroom. There's wrinkles in my forehead like an old Jersey cow, and my nose is a-growing rather like a big direct sow. What had I better take for this complaint? Don't answer, as I will be home in a few days. Did this letter work? No, this one didn't work either. She married another man and lived out her life in Three Forks, Montana. Okay, this is the last of my territorial ones here. Benjamin Horton was a postmaster at Stone Station, which is between Phillipsburg and Drummond. I know most of you have driven past where it is. After another long day's work is done, and the balance of the family in bed, sitting alone in our room, our cozy little bed, sleep has departed from my eyes, thinking just 1 week ago tonight, I gave you the parting kiss on your long journey alone, with a secret prayer for your safety and return home. And as we are both on the downward grade of life, I long most sincerely, this will be our last parting till the enemy of mankind shall separate us to meet. I hope in a better life, where we shall no more part, and no more where we shall part no more, as said in the book of life. That's the last letter in my book. I believe from other letters I have from this correspondence, this was when Benjamin's wife, Sarah, made a trip back to Illinois to visit her family back home. Benjamin died in 1900 and Sarah in 1914. They had 3 sons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ken. That was wonderful. We are running a little over. If anyone has any quick questions, we can take a couple. Otherwise, if you have more in-depth questions, maybe you could come up to Ken afterwards and ask them in person if he's willing to hang around for a little bit. And we also do have Ken's book, Montana Through the Mail, for sale over here. So if you want to dig more into all of these really interesting letters, feel free to purchase his book. So any questions that we want to ask right now? Okay, I'm going to give you the microphone so we can hear it on the recording.
Hey, Ken, some of the names of the people that you have in the letters prior to 1868, have you checked to verify that they were on the 1899 book of prominent men of Montana to be eligible pioneers, so to speak?
I have for most of them. I researched a lot of sources because some sources are invalid. The internet has made things great in the genealogy sites, Ancestry.com, Family Search, and so on. But actually, a lot of stuff from these genealogy sites is wrong. The family even has it wrong. So you have to search a lot of places, including newspapers, Chronicling America, the Historical Society's page for Montanas, and books. I have like 1,000 books in my collection on Montana. Books like you mentioned, the 1899 Pioneer Society, which gives often brief biographies of these. And obviously I went too long, but I didn't have time. In that book, it's loaded with endnotes where I document what I found and where I found it. And the 1899 book you mentioned is in the endnotes quite a bit.
Okay, because also too, if you have an actual letter and it's dated, that would prove that that person was a resident of Montana at that time, and therefore some of their names don't appear in the book, which I'd be really interested to see who that is and add those names.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm willing to hang around as long as they leave the room open, but I'm sure you guys want to get going pretty soon yourselves.
Yeah, so we'll take one more question really quick with the group, and then we'll let you scatter and come up to Ken if you have further questions.
Well, if I only get one, I might make it a long one. How did you get interested in this passion of yours, and where do you find the letters?
Okay, I mentioned early, one of my inspirations was the Montana Historical Society book, which is still out there. I don't know if you've reprinted it, but it's out there in used stores. A manuscript history of Montana, which presented a lot of letters, including ones that I didn't. These, in my book, I use mostly personal letters. This book includes merchant letters, and banker letters, and just all. But that kind of got me interested. But I've always been interested in history. And there's 2 people sitting in the room right now, Gene and Bev Allen, who used to be my former boss when I worked for Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. And he was always interested in this stuff, and he got me going too, along with a couple other people. As far as where I get it, I'm kind of an old coyote. It comes from a lot of places. Like I say, that I collect other documents, photographs, everything I can, because in a lot of places I match things up, a photograph of this, along with the letter and so on. The first series of letters I bought was from a postal history auction site in Massachusetts. You know, some people collect stamps, and these places sell stamps, but they also sell cancels of dead towns, for example, is one collecting area. Montana at one time had, over time, had 2,075 post offices. Right now, we only have about 300 in Montana. My collection has about 1,400 of the towns. So some of them I'll probably never ever get. Some of them only existed for a month. And a lot of people think of mining ghost towns. Well, there's more ghost towns during the homesteading period than during the mining period. A lot of little towns in eastern and central Montana. So as to where I got them afterwards, antique stores, auctions of estates, eBay has been a big thing in the since late 1990s. I bring a lot of stuff home to Montana from eBay. Sometimes it costs me a lot of money. And I was a mid-level state employee, so I don't have a lot of money. But when I bought things at auctions and estate sales and so on, a lot of it's other state items, and I sell that on eBay to pay for the Montana stuff I bring home. Is that it?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Ken. This was wonderful.